Good morning, everybody. My name is Dave Finale, and this is Real Estate Talk TGIF. And we are in episode 349, which equates to 345 weeks in a row. Why does it equate to that? Well, we had 4 extra episodes. And I want to thank our guest today. We have special guests all the time. Every guest is a special guest. Why are they special? Because they always hit on something that I'm working on or something that I see that agents need or mortgage professionals need. So everyone has an expertise that I love to talk to and talk about. And Mia, you and I met very briefly out at an event from John Cheplack and a mutual friend and a colleague of ours, and just loved everything you had to say. And then when I looked at you online, I saw your ebook, and I said, Unstuck. Well, you know what? That hits me right where I live, simply because there are so many agents out there that are stuck. Thank you so much for coming here today.
Thanks for having me.
This is going to be fun. So why don't we just get going? Nelson, hit the video. Real estate agents want to acquire clients consistently to grow their business and income for that great lifestyle. This broadcast brings you the best people in the industry to support that quest. This is Dave Finale, and I'm here to bring you the Real Estate Skill Builder broadcast, Real Estate Talk TGIF, brought to you by Real Estate Skill Builder and Align, your premier real estate solution. Good morning, everybody. We are back, and here we are. So we are with Mie Yamashita. Let me tell you a little bit about Mia. Let me get my page up. You're the head of team production, Reside platform. You're a business and life coach, top performing real estate coach, known for your boundless energy and innovative coaching lifestyle. I love the way you do things. Partners with real estate agents to elevate their business and improve the quality of their life. And I think that's really one of the most important things that we all look for. We don't think about it when we get into this business about quality of life. I think we all say, we want to make more money and schedule, have our own schedule and work whenever we want. But you've been able to help agents do that, as well as generate millions in gross closed commission. So I want to thank you so much for being here today. You are, as it says on the bottom, you are the head of team production and with the Reside platform. And we can talk a little bit about that as we move on. But first, Mia, I have a question, and then I want to know all about you and how you got to where you are. And the question is, what does TGIF stand for?
Thank goodness it's Friday.
You're very close, and unfortunately, you are in the 90% that get that question wrong, but that's okay. The answer is, thank God, it's finale. No, it's just plain and simple. It's what I do every week. And when I named this broadcast over 6.5 years ago, I did not mean it to sound like that, but it came out. It worked. Someone said it, and now people say, "Hey, Dave, you got TGIF this Friday. Who's on?" So, Mia, talk to me about your journey, your path, how you got to where you are, being the badass that you are in coaching for all these great agents.
It was a combination of being on my own self-work journey and then being in the right place at the right time to take on certain opportunities. I didn't know much about real estate when I first got into it, like most of us. And I had come from the restaurant industry. I was a general manager of a bar nightclub restaurant. And I was, just working 70 hours a week, had a day off every other week. And when I moved to North Carolina, I'm from Phoenix. I moved to North Carolina and started over, and which is a story in itself. But I was determined to have a job that wasn't putting me back in the restaurant industry. And so I applied all over the place on Craigslist to anyone that would take me. And only one person called me back. Her name is Manda Price. She's one of my best friends to this day. She's an amazing Keller Williams team leader, but also just an incredible human being. And she essentially recruited me to be an inside sales agent for the operating principals team. And so, I got started as an ISA and set hundreds of appointments in my first year, and then got licensed and put 500 contract in my first week, hit the ground running.
Wow.
And around that same time, I had been working with some of the agents in the productivity coaching program at that market center on conversion skills.
Right.
And so I had, created a little bit of credibility because those agents started getting into production. And I didn't have real estate sales experience at that point. I just knew how to convert very well.
Right.
But I'm also very organizationally driven. I really like operationally driven, excuse me. And I had put together a 30, 60, 90 booklet for those agents just for fun. And so all of that kind of created some evidence of my potential in this space. And I always wanted to be a coach, but when I was making that declaration or making that goal, the part of me that was doing it was more ego driven than really knowing if I had the talent or if I had, the experience. And so I was always open to it, but then that goal shifted for me as I went into that self-work journey. And around that time, the productivity coach that was at the Market Center decided to go back into full-time production, and they just didn't have anyone else on the bench at the time. And so I got an opportunity. And by the time I took over the coaching program, there were 5 agents left in the program. And in under 9 months, Amanda, the team leader of the Market Center, and myself, we built that to over 180 agents. And 100 of those agents were recruited from outside of the Market Center. We had over 60% of those agents in production, and we just did something really special there at that Market Center. So I got started by happenstance, but it was absolutely like such a natural fit for my journey and my skill sets.
That's fantastic. And I want to ask a couple of questions. A couple of things you said, and the first thing is going to go to you started with 5 agents, you said, and built it up to 180. Is that correct?
182 when I left.
Okay, great. So, and 100 of those were right from you recruited yourselves, right?
Yeah, which Amanda and I partnered together on that. She was the one who would get them in the door, and I would, oftentimes close them.
All right, and then so I build all that up to a point where so most of these are newer agents, or they're new agents to the Market Center, et cetera, and your job is to coach them to productivity, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so when a new agent comes in, or a newer agent has been in the market in the business for a while that really hasn't done much, what's the process to get them going? Because that is like the secret of everybody, that everybody says they can do this, they can do that. We've got metrics at Align that can show different things and how we can get it rolling in 60 to 90 days. Talk to me about your process. Okay.
So I know what people want here is give me the 10 steps, give me the formula.
Right.
Excuse me, sorry.
That's okay.
If I laugh, it makes me cough. So
you and I are in great shape today, aren't we?
Yeah, we're doing great. I know what people want is a 10 steps into how do I get my agents into production. And it starts with the leader. It always starts with the leader and lifting your leadership lid. One thing I learned early on, I don't know exactly what it was that caused me to figure this out. It was most likely a combination of the self-work and the previous trainings. And anyways, one thing I figured out early on is that it's not that agents don't want it. And I think that's sort of this preposterous thing that it's a weird story we choose to believe.
Right,
as leaders,
I agree.
Agents don't want it. I'm like, let's just play that. Like, let's use our cognitive thinking here for a second and really take in the process of an agent going from most commonly being an employee, having stability, and then also look at societal programming that reinforces that American dream, stable 9-to-5 background, taking the entrepreneurial route, which is more common now than it was in the past. Right. Taking the entrepreneurial route is a high risk when most of them don't have a high risk tolerance. And so they look at the potential of real estate. They go through the motions of, going to the classes, and we joke that it's like such a low barrier to entry. And while I do think there's, truth to that when it comes to getting into real estate, taking the test and paying the money is one thing. Taking the risk to jump off of the diving board and say, I'm going to go 100% commission is scary.
Yep.
And it's not that I'm, I sit here and think that we just have a bunch of people in fear, but some of the work that I've done, on myself, one of the things I've learned is that when you're in fear, your parasympathetic nervous system is typically engaged, and it puts you into flight, fight, freeze, or fawn. And so I started making that correlation that an agent who's frozen or hiding or overwhelmed it's very unlikely that they just don't want it, although that might eventually become the story they adopt because of their comfort or their lack of skills in regulating themselves in that space. And so I just kept meeting them where they're at. And I get asked, like, what does that mean? What does that look like?
I hear that a lot, and it's like, okay, meet them where they're at, but where they're at is like, it's like there's a fight all the time, right? Go ahead.
Well, we can't make people do things, even though, like, I heard this quote a long time ago. Think about how hard it is to change yourself, and then think about the luck you'll have changing anybody else. Like, we spend like tumultuous hours in time and investment trying to change things about ourselves, fix things about ourselves, improve things about ourselves. And I think that's one of the hardest things that we do as human beings is like evolve ourselves or grow, because it inherently is wrapped in challenge. And so when I think about my ability to change somebody else according to my expectations for them, it's just not going to work like that. Right. Now, we have some alignment in our expectations, right? Like they want the same thing that I want for them, which is to produce. But meeting them where they're at is understanding the place they're in at that moment, right, and the place they want to go, and then closing the gap. Like John Cheplack always says, like, the growth is in the gap, which I heard once I got into his world. I heard that once I got into his world, that the growth is in the gap, and we have total alignment in that. I just called it something different, is meeting them where they're at and then going through the pain to get to your end goal.
All right, so meet them where they're at, and then their goal, that's where the gap is.
Yeah. So like let's put an example around this. Let's pick a story we've all heard before. An agent has to make calls to leads in order to convert those into appointments, in order to get to a consult that would cause an agreement to be signed and then eventually go under contract and close. The lead measure is they have to show up to the call. Now, if I have an agent who's not showing up, I could get stuck in my story and say, agents never show up, which, by the way, was the most common story I would hear from other productivity coaches when I eventually started coaching other productivity coaches.
Yep.
My agents never show. My agents never show. Well, I had the morning call where agents would be on there every single morning at 8:30 in the morning, and we'd have 50 to 60 agents on every call. And this is virtually. This is between 2 states and multiple market center locations or business center locations. So I was like, that story's not true, although I understand why it can feel true, and I understand what could cause it to become true. Is because the leader gets fed up with saying, hey, I want you to show up. I already told you what you need to do. Like sometimes as adults, and leaders or parents will say, like, I'm not going to keep repeating myself. You're an adult. You should be able to figure this out. Like, have you heard or said that before?
Hell yeah. Yeah.
And I just chose to make a generous assumption about them, that they genuinely did want to show up, and for whatever reason, they weren't able to prioritize it, and whatever their reasoning was irrelevant, because I know how easy it is for us to be susceptible to the stories that we tell ourselves, and how difficult it is to gain awareness over pairing action against that story and picking a better story. I know that's hard. And so I would meet them where they're at. If they didn't show up, I would say, hey, Dave, I didn't see you on the call this morning. Is everything okay? Oh yeah, everything's fine. I had, my kid, I had an appointment. I just couldn't get out of bed today, whatever. And then I would say, well, let me know if you need any support. I can't wait to see you tomorrow. And if they didn't show up the next day, I would say, hey, Dave, I noticed you weren't on the call again today. Is everything okay? Now, I'm pretty good at knowing who's there, but I also systematize that. I have an assistant that would go and send me the absences. I still do this in my training now to this day. So when people are missing, I will check in. Hey, everything okay? Hey, I noticed you didn't make it to the first training class. Is everything okay? When I have 50 to 60 people on a training, it's difficult for me to know who's who on the first day.
Exactly.
So, we systematize the back end of that, which I also let my agents know. Hey, most days I'm noticing, and there's times that I can't. I want you to know my team sends me attendance every day, so I know how to check in with you. And so I'll check in, and if it's day 2 and you say, you know, oh, life, or work, or whatever reason, the moment that I get passive aggressive, the moment that I get frustrated about their lack of effort, is the moment that I've made this about me. And as a leader, although there is a harmony in the partnership that we have, I can't get frustrated for them. I can't get frustrated because if my expectations become my own suffering.
Would you call that wanting it more than they do, or you think you want it more than they do?
Yeah, which is just our ego, by the way. You cannot want something more than somebody else.
That's my ego or their ego?
It's your ego. It's the leader's ego.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, Michelle Anderson, she was my productivity coach when I first got started, and she's, you know, what's funny, the other day I posted something about, you know, just like life stuff going on, and she reached out to me. Like that's the person Michelle is. I call her Mish, and she's amazing. But anyways, that was one of the first things she said when I attended my first like regional area meeting for productivity coaches. She said, if you think you want it more than they do, that's your ego. I was like, ooh, man, it sent me down a whole rabbit hole, existential crisis.
It just did for me. Yep. I get it. And I, you know, I look at my career, my life, and owning a brokerage and where I made mistakes. And I'm very open about the mistakes I've made. And I think it may have been ego was my biggest problem. Right? It may have been ego was my biggest problem because I wanted something. I was trying to force, I think, either the wrong people or obviously doing it the wrong way. But there has to be the right people too, don't you think?
How do you know who the right people are?
That's a great question. That's why I asked the question.
John hit me with that one. You know, there's truth to that. Sure, the right person will meet you in you know, the journey. But I think it's more about, I don't need to be concerned about being the right person. It's that, hey, did I put forth the effort, hold the boundaries, and support them? And were they able to autonomously walk in that path with me? And if not, it's okay. We weren't a fit right now. Maybe we will be later. Maybe we never will be. I don't have to really worry about it being the right people. I just have to worry about, do I actually have boundaries and standards / agreements inside of my organization? Am I crystal clear in them? And do I model them really well? And so I just need to know that I'm showing up and doing my part, and everything else is not a surprise if it doesn't work out. Like the right people, or the people that will step up, or the people that will, you know, walk in the journey and it's the right time and place for them, they end up becoming the right people.
Okay, so there's so many things going on in my head right now, so I have to hit one thing, right? So the right people I get, right? The right people, they're the right people if you set your standards and stick by your disciplines as well, correct?
Yeah, which we might be saying 2 different things there on standards and disciplines, but generally, yes.
Right. So what I mean by, but basically standards, we have our own standards. And I remember I used to hear that your standard is the agent that produces the least amount in your organization. That was probably about 15 years ago. I heard that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that for the most part. Yes.
So the right person is when you set your standards and they're going to be able to work toward them and work in them. Yeah. That being said, the persistent rule, 80-20 rule, is that something that we've caused ourselves, or is that something that we can work?
Chicken or the egg, which recently I have not vetted this, so, you know, fact check me if you need to, but I saw a study that came out that said the chicken came first because it requires something in the egg, some sort of protein or whatever to make the egg. So the egg could have never made the chicken. Which I don't know if it's chicken or egg here with the 80-20. Did we cause it, or is it because it's just the 80-20? I always see this though on every team and every market center, every broker. Like constantly, there is an 80-20. Like there's a truth to that. But I also think that your floor can determine what that 80-20 looks like. Like, you know, if you're a team that does 600 units a year, like I have a team I've worked with for a couple of years, and their agents have a per agent productivity of like 22, 32, something like that.
That is amazing.
Yeah, and it's unusual. I've worked with several teams that do that are in the $100 million range, $200 million range, that, you know, their agents have a very high per agent productivity. It's a combination, like, and it's always something different. Like, it's not always the same thing, and everything works different. Like, one team, their agents do like 34 to 36. I think they've even had it as high as 40, but they have a mega ISA program inside of their team. The other team that does, you know, I think 22 or 32, I cannot remember exactly, they don't buy leads. They are 100% sphere-based team, and everything goes into client events. And so your 80-20, the least of them is doing, you know, 12 to 24. That's their, you know, the bottom 80%. Like, the least of them are doing, or the high of them are doing like 40, 50.
Right. You know, it's those numbers are mind-boggling when you have a per person productivity of 22.
I think that's the low. I think that's too low. I think it's 32. I can't remember exactly what
that's pretty amazing. So I want to ask you one thing, so I have something clear. You said flight, fight, freeze, or
fawn. People pleasing. Fawn is like you've heard an agent say, "No, I didn't get that, but you'd be so proud of me because I did X, Y, Z." That's fawning.
Fawning. Okay. That's why I didn't get it. All right. So we've talked about, you made a really good point, and with me, okay? So I can only talk about me and how I look at things and everything. And it might be archaic, it might be too contemporary, but the point is that meeting them where they're at and is putting their goal. And I know John always says the goal is in the gap. The growth is in the gap. And I get that. And what we're doing is really important with people, because, you know, the people move the money, right? So you talked about earlier that when you would get people going, and we talked about, I think we went off on a tangent a little bit on, they need the lead gen, and they need the lead gen, and they need the lead gen, and go from here, here, and here. Is there, I mean, you built the 30, 60, 90 booklet. Talk to me about that and the process from the beginning on.
In terms of, so are you asking what did my 30, 60, 90 look like, or what did it look like? How did I get agents to lead generate consistently?
Yes. Yes.
So, I modeled, first of all, I modeled for them what I wanted from them. We don't do as well what we're told, but we do a really good job at what we're shown. I have a 2-year-old, and he mimics everything that I do. One day I went, "Oh gosh," and he goes, "Oh gosh, oh dear, oh gosh." He's 2.5 years old. If I don't hold a boundary with him, he knows that where the boundary really is. It's either non-existent or not. And I'm not to say that adults or toddlers, but our base programming comes from childhood. And that's where a lot of our programming is developed, established, and then, you know, pushed over time. Our prefrontal cortex doesn't fully develop until our mid-20s. So we're emotion-based creatures first. We're hardwired for connection, hardwired for it, which I could go into that for an hour and a half in itself. The reason that this matters is because when we look to a leader, when we look to what is expected of us, it maybe for a little bit we can follow what they just tell us to do, and we can have some trust, like, okay, they know what they're doing. I just got to show up. I hear agents say this all the time. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it.
Right.
But then tell them exactly what to do and they don't do it. And again, it's not because they don't want to. To me, that's a preposterous thing. Like, I just choose not to believe that. There may be some agents where they just don't want to do the work, maybe that, you know, and they just find their way out. But I just choose to believe that if they're here, they want to do the work. If they got their license, maybe they just don't know how to do the work. So I had to model it. So I would get on a Zoom with them, because we were in 2 states and 2 market centers, and then a few business centers. And we would lead generate together, and we would all go on mute, and we would put our stuff in the chat and talk to each other. And if someone didn't show, guess what I would do? I would check in and say, "Hey, I missed you today. Hey, where were you? Hey, is everything okay?" And I never said things like, "Hey, you said you wanted this and you're not here," and like make it, because that's shame driven. Shame driven is going to, again, activate that parasympathetic nervous system. It's going to cause them to hide, as shame does. And so instead I would just get really curious, and then I would find a way to support them. And so the way that I got them to show up was, number one, I had to show up. I had to model that for them.
Right.
And I did teach them tactically, like, here's what it looks like when you lead generate. I explained the why behind things, so they understood the logic behind getting into it. But again, the prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed until we're in our mid-20s, which means that that's the logic center of the brain. So we're emotionally driven animals, emotionally driven beings. So I know I have to address the emotion first, but it's not me being the therapist or the mommy. And I think that's where a lot of leaders get it wrong, is they try to mentor or mommy, and that's not what they need. They need someone to model boundaries and standards for them. And so when you said earlier, standards, like the least of your, whoever's doing the lowest, like that's your standards. Like I agree with that to an extent. Like I agree that that's the result usually, but you get what you model. And so if you say you don't show up, you don't get leads, I see this constantly, but you don't have anyone else to work these leads. Like I have several coaching clients that have a massive sphere, and they have just like come list me business, but they can't work it all. So they'll do handoffs to their agents, and they need the agent to work the opportunity because they physically can't do it anymore because they're building the team and they're working their own business. Right. And so what do you think they commonly see happen, Dave, with those agents?
They don't get the business.
They don't lead generate.
They don't lead generate. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't have to, because someone's passing them the money, passing them the business. And then they'll say, well, I can't stop handing them the business, but I shouldn't be handing them the business if they're not lead generating and building their own business, and so it's not that they're not willing to lead generate. It's not that they're not willing to abide standards. They're going to do what you let them do because that's human nature.
Okay, so in other words, what we're saying is you need to do more in front of them than you want them to do.
You just have to model what you want them to do. You don't even have to do more. You could do more. You probably will do more just naturally. But most like team owners, they're in the 1% category, in my opinion. Somebody that has built their production up to a certain level and then will take on the risk and overhead and investment of building a team or a brokerage. You know exactly what that's like. It's stressful. It's challenging. There's a lot of hard points in that. You and everyone like you falls in the 1% of people that are running a different race than what we think agents should be doing. They're not you. They'll never be you. So you'll do more as a result of who you are as a person. The expectation isn't that you have to do more. You just have to model the behavior. So you have to show up to the lead gen. You have to show up to inspecting the database and letting them know that, hey, when I say that I want you to do this, I'm checking. That's where that, inspect what you expect saying comes from. That's basically what that is.
It's just like, it's inspect what you expect. And we can go there down to the data there and down to the metrics and everything else. You say you want this. There I go, right? I just made a big mistake. I said, you say you want this. I just caught myself because, you know what? Admittedly, I have used that shit myself, right? As a leader, and realizing, okay, that was probably the wrong thing, because I try to, when you said that, I'm thinking, okay, so no shame-driven speeches, right? But sometimes when we talk to, let's say we're talking to a homeowner about selling and we're negotiating a price, we say, look, how does this work with a discussion or a conversation with a seller where you say, we're negotiating a $10,000 difference in price, and you said you wanted to do this, this, and this. This little bit of difference is going to get you there. Why wouldn't you do that? How does those two to me look similar, but they're not, right?
They're exactly the same. You're motivating somebody, but you can use someone's motivation to get them where they're going, but how you use it matters. If you weaponize it, that's shame driven. If you use good questions to get them to where you want to go, then they get to take ownership of it. So instead of saying like, why wouldn't you do that? I might say, hey Dave, when we spoke earlier, you mentioned that, getting to Florida by March was the most important thing. And like you said that, right? Just roll for this. Okay, you said that. How do I represent you and support you with to achieve that goal? How do I do my job if we don't take this offer, even though there's a gap? How can we make this work so that you get what you need? What would that look like?
That's a much different way of saying the way I said it, right?
Well, one is like, I'm holding space. The other one is taking up space. So like me saying like, hey, why wouldn't you do like this? Hello, it's so obvious. This is my ego stepping into the conversation and saying, you just need to do what I'm telling you to do and you need to trust me. And hey, by the way, here's all this evidence of things you said. And so you basically already agree with me, instead of holding space and saying, what do you think about this? Well, how would I get that done? How am I supposed to do that? Or what would that look like? And so now they get to step into their conscious brain and formulate a response where they will now connect to logic.
So looking at that, this is very cool. This is very helpful. As I said, and I don't hold this back. I said most of the things that I do, I'm looking so how I can help more people, and those are the questions I ask. So when we bring in agents and we're talking to agents and we're trying to help them grow their business, we just talked about what their goals were, right? So would that be their expectation, or would that be helping them set expectations for goals? Like, for instance, a lot of people will say, what's the difference between a realistic and an unrealistic expectation? And some will say, well, if you say don't set unrealistic expectations, you're telling them to limit themselves. And others will say, well, you got to shoot for the moon. And others will say, fake it until you make it. So can we put all that in a ball and pick it out one by one?
Yeah. Okay. So number one, it's all going to come down to the behaviors, habits, and activities that would even cause any of that to happen. So I'm personally not a big fan of goals. I think we should have goals. Okay, I'm not saying goals are bad. I don't think they're an excellent motivator. I have this video that I show in my my training every time I do a Rise training in Reside, and I show this video of this guy talks about the cost of inaction, and at the end he says, in which scenario are you more likely to do? Are you more likely to run towards a cuddly teddy bear or away from a hungry grizzly bear? You're more likely to run away from a hungry grizzly bear. So it's really ineffective to dangle someone's goal in front of them and say, don't you want this? Don't you want this? When really that's not a powerful enough driver, especially if they've never experienced that thing before. And so they may not have the belief that they can get there. They may not have the skills or the habits to get there yet. And so I always say, believe that anything is possible. Believe that you can hit the big goal. That's the only thing that I need to do in terms of like not limiting myself, because goals can become unintentional ceilings, right? Yes. I mean, 10 years ago, there's no version of me that thought I would ever be where I'm at right now. I didn't have the influences, the environment, the mentors. I didn't have anyone pouring into me. When I met Amanda Price and I sat down with her to interview for the ISA position, it was the first time in my life, I was 28, that anyone had ever asked me about my goals. And so like, what do I want to do with my life? No one had ever asked me that. And she was the very first person to ever ask me. So I didn't have the skills or the tools yet to conceptualize something bigger than myself. My goals were too small and I didn't even realize it. I thought they were big. They were too small, so they can become an unintentional ceiling. Right. So when it comes to like a big goal, believe that it's possible, believe that you can get there. That belief has to become real, because it shifts from, if I go do the things that that person would do, then I'll have the things that that person would have, and then I'll become that person. But instead, in order for us to actually like motivate or move somebody to that space, I have to work on their programming. I have to work on them starting to believe that they are that person now, how to become that person now. That will cause them to do the things that type of person would do. And then they get to have the things that that type of person would have. So I have to work immediately on the narratives that they tell themselves.
Understand. So that's.
Did I make a bigger gap here? Are we on this?
But it's about them understanding what to expect from what they want. I know that sounds crazy too. I know, but that's
No, I look at expectations as our own suffering. I'm not saying don't have expectations, but it's like we've done this, you've done this, I'm sure I've done this, where I build out my perfect calendar for the week, and it represents the exact version of myself that I would want to be, but my habits don't currently support that version of myself. And so then it just becomes this weird thing I created to torture me, make me anxious, and make me feel bad about myself because I don't execute fully on it. That's how I look at goals. So yes, I want you to have a goal. And yes, I want you to work towards something. And then we're going to put it away and pretend that it's not there anymore. And we're going to get right into where are my habits at now that would need to shift and change in order for me to even get into that space. What do I have to change now?
So, okay. So let's look at a goal. And a lot of the business planning and the goal setting that we look at in our business. Okay. So what's your goal? And the goal is could be an income number, or it could be a unit number, or whatever it is. And then we say, okay, we're going to reverse engineer that back, cut it up in 4 into quarters, and then cut it up into months, and cut it up to weeks. But isn't that the opposite of what you're saying?
It's a yes and. The goal informs the path, and then I need to release the goal. So I look at it like this. If you set me into a forest by myself, and you give me a map, and you say, stay on this path and it'll get you to where you need to go, but all I can do from that point is take one step at a time. If you say instead, here's the map and you need to get to the top of Mount Everest, now go. I have not been able to fully prepare myself for what Mount Everest will. I mean, most people die on the way down, right? Like the amount of training that I would need to do, all of the habits and behaviors that I would need to establish before I could ever step foot on that path or step foot on that mountain. There's a path before the path. And so a goal, it's like, yes, I can do all the things it takes for me to get there, but I need to release the goal and stay focused on the activities that will get me there. Now I know which direction I'm pointed in.
So, all right. So I want to, the goal informs the path, then release the goal.
Yeah.
That's what you just said, right?
Because the goal will come based on your activities.
Right. So
you'll probably exceed the goal because of your activities, but you have to stay focused on the thing that will cause it.
So in other words, you okay. So let me make sure I got to put this right and understand this. We're talking about releasing the goal because we've set up the path. Like if you said you want to go to, you want to go to St. Louis. I don't know where that came from, but you want to go to St. Louis. This is the road. You got to get on Route 80 and you got to stay there until you see a sign for St. Louis, and then you get off. Very simple, right? Mm-hmm. So going to St. Louis now is not the goal. Staying on the path of Route 80 is where you've got to go, and that's how you've got to get there. Is that correct?
Making sure you had an oil change, and did you pack enough food? Are you going to have enough money to get to food if you didn't pack the food? Like, do you have the other things prepared before you can ever think about St. Louis as the end game? Got it.
So everything along the way that you need to do to get there, you've got set up. And then when you do all those things, it's going to get you to the goal, even though you're not looking at the goal as it is. You've set up your methodology. You've set up your action steps. You set it all up, correct?
Yeah. And along the way, guess what? You might find a detour. Along the way, you might think on this road trip, St. Louis isn't that important to me. I'm going to set my sights on something different. So the path allows you to actually engage your human experience versus live somewhere that doesn't even exist yet, which is a potential future. And I think that's what allows our true experience with life to unfold versus creating suffering in that experience because I made a box that all of a sudden I have to fit in, but I was the constructor of the box.
Okay. So now I want to throw a curveball here. Okay. I've done a lot of work on myself and a lot of work with a lot of agents with the word doubt, right? I've got a whole presentation on it. I've presented it many, many times. And I look at that, and doubt can be fueled by distractions or the doubt is the distraction, so on and so forth. And I look at doubt in oneself as a fork in the road, right? And most times when people are not sure of themselves or sure of their path, we've already given them the path here, but as you said, there's going to be other things along the way. Like, oh, maybe I want to do that instead. There's that doubt path. And I always look at that as the right and the left side of a fork, where the right side is, that's your path. That's where you're going to go. And the left side is a distraction. And then what makes them learn, the winners, not to use a word like that, but that's the word that came up. The winner, or the one that gets themselves back, is the one that's got to go through those woods to get back on the right path. What do you see when someone has self-doubt in their path to where they want to get to?
So I look at doubt as, and I've never really contemplated the word specifically doubt, but as you're saying this, like doubt is a macro emotion, meaning It's like overarching. It disguises like it's a big emotion that is holding underneath it a bunch of other little emotions, whether it's feelings of inadequacy, feelings of self-worth. And so, or like lack of self-worth or lack of confidence, or maybe there's something that, they encountered in the path that made them, reminded them of something that was really traumatic, and they're just in a freeze state. And so like doubt is like the umbrella of all these other things that could be going on. And so like we can't like get into the micro emotions and then generalize that for everyone. And so I this is how I see, this is what's coming to me right now. This sounds like the emotional life cycle of a goal, which is in the beginning, you get into uninformed optimism. Uninformed optimism is like the planning stage of the goal, the visualization of what could be. You get like bursts of endorphins, and like you're feeling really good about like all these things you're going to accomplish. Like when you started your brokerage, you were probably really excited about the potential of what it will become one day, and like you had a lot of enthusiasm around it. That is uninformed optimism. And then when you start taking action towards that goal, you start getting context for what that experience is really offering. The good feelings kind of go away, and then you get hit in the face with what it's really going to take. And that's the informed pessimism. Now I get context. So, I didn't think about, I got to hire, an accountant for this, or I need to talk to a lawyer about, looking at all this paperwork, or I got to file this thing, or I got to take this class. And so all the things that weren't in the excitement, or that might have been in the plan, but actually going through the process of it, like, well, this isn't the fun part, right? Like I have a client right now who just started a brokerage, was in a team, went solo, started a brokerage, and all these things show up along the way where doubt will peek in because you're going through the hard parts.
Right.
Then when you get through informed pessimism, if you stay the course, if you keep going, which the course can be wobbly and ugly and constantly changing, you might not know what to expect from it, then you get into what's called the valley of despair. And I think that's the forest part that you're talking about of like down the path. The valley of despair, I'm sure you've had this moment multiple times in your career where you're like, I just don't know if it's worth it. I don't know if I can keep going. I'm going to keep going. You chose to keep going. When we're in the valley of despair, it's like, that's when our self-doubt is at its highest. That's where our feelings of inadequacy are at its highest, where we just either we don't know if it's worth it. We don't know if we can do it. Whatever the story is, everyone's is a little bit different. But it's that moment where it's the hardest to tolerate out of the entire process. If and when you push through that, which most people will repeat the first two parts of that cycle, very few will even get to the valley of despair, and many will give up in the valley of despair. But when you push through, which you're here, you're still standing today with your brokerage, then you get to informed optimism, which is a stride. It's like, okay, I'm still experiencing a lot of challenge, but I'm more equipped to handle the challenges now. I feel more confident in my ability to handle those challenges. And then you get to joy and fulfillment, which is either the goal you set out to hit, or the goal, what the goal evolved to be once you had that context, and then you repeat that cycle over and over and over again for the rest of your life.
So you just went through the cycle. Is there a trigger or something to get out of that valley of despair?
The only way out is through.
The only way out is what?
Through. You can't. If you're getting out of the valley of despair for comfort, you most likely gave up. The only way out of the valley of despair is to stay in action with the activity. So stay consistent to the activities and do that with the pain. So like I know we're going short on time. I can go seven more minutes. The valley of despair part, or like when I tell this story, when I do trainings, I always talk about my marathon training and how like it was a super embarrassing experience. And I cried, I peed my pants, and I threw up like all in this like 5-mile run in front of my boyfriend. It was like not a good time. And I wanted to quit more than I've ever wanted to quit in my life. I had to keep running in order to develop a tolerance for the discomfort in that space, which is what made me more capable to handle the challenge. So like when I go to the gym, I can't just pick up a pair of 50-pound dumbbells if right now the only muscle I have is for 10 pounds. I have to keep breaking the muscle down and going through the pain and the challenge to build the muscle to get to 50 pounds. That 50 pounds didn't get any lighter. I got stronger. Did I say that in a way that makes sense?
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Hey, you know what? We are up on time. We're getting there. And, you know, we didn't get a chance to get into your ebook, Agents. How to get your agents on.
The link for it. You can download. Anyone can download it. Do you have the link for that already?
We have your. Is it? What is the link for that? We can add that.
Yeah, it's the Unstuck. I'll send it to you and make sure that you've got that link. So people, if they want to download it, they can download it.
Okay, great. So there's so many things that have come up and really are really pertinent to any agent, whether you're a new agent, whether you're a stuck agent, whether you're an agent that wants to scale. I mean, we talked, I briefly said something about earlier, mid-performers want credit and winners want pressure.
Yeah.
And that was a quote from one of your posts. And, you know, a lot of people, I see it, especially this time, because it's awards time of year here in New Jersey. And we see a lot of people boasting that they did this and they did that. And it's funny. I talked to one of my friends and colleagues yesterday. Well, I believe he did like 35 million last year. He says, it's funny. I see those awards, but I've never applied for them. I wonder what that is. And I said, it's an award, but you've been mostly after the reward for your work and how you've helped people, right? Mm-hmm. And so I look at another agent that I talked with, and just to give others inspiration, who did 24 million last year, and we do an action to impact type of deal where, you know, every day we're showing up and making calls and lead gen, whichever way we're doing it. It's something we do 2 weeks out of every month. And the people that are doing the most business are showing up to do this, to be involved in it, because they want, as that quote was, they want the pressure to move forward. And that's one of the things that Align does, and that you push forward on it. So it's really important that people see that as it's not about, you know, having people pat you on the back. For me, right? We all want it. Let's face it. We like to hear it.
That's how you'll drive them. That's a way to keep them going for some people.
Right. For some people. And like some people want the pressure. I mean, you know, another one was that I saw posted was pick your hard moment, you know, pick the hard thing that you're going to do and just do it. Right. Which makes an awful lot of sense. So I just got a couple of the things. What I want to ask you is, so there's a lot of agents still getting into the business. We're not going anywhere, and this business is still going to thrive no matter what happens in our economy, no matter what happens with interest rates. I mean, we've lived through all different kinds of things. So if I was an agent that, you know, I really want more support, I want more out of my business, but I haven't been able to get on track, what would you suggest to them?
Okay, that's a loaded question, but because I would need to ask some questions. But if I'm an agent, my business isn't what I want it to be right now. I would spend less time thinking of ways to get creative, and I would immediately get into some sort of action so that I could fire off some neurons that will create a neural pathway that will create a habit to get me to stay consistent to that. So I would make one call. If your business isn't where you want it to be, I'd make one call. And after I make that call, I would tell myself, I just got to make the next call. And after that call, I tell myself, I just got to make the next call. So I would literally just get into action.
Love it. Two other quick things. Number one, how do I help you build and grow your business?
You know, sharing, having me on your podcast is a great way to do that. And then just telling people about me and what I do is a way you can support me.
Excellent. And last but certainly not least, the hat.
I can't wait for it. I'm very excited. I will rock the hat.
It's going to come to you. And everybody, I want you to thank everybody for coming. Next week, we've got Valentine's Day, and we'll be on this with another great guest. And right now, I want to thank everybody for joining Real Estate Talk TGIF. just hang on if you would, Mia, just as we go out. And we'll see you in a minute. We'll see everybody next week. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, thanks.
See you soon. Happy